Hello there, and welcome to this session of probability theory. This is ordinary level mathematics for grammar and technical schools. The question says, what are the possible outcomes in a toss of a coin thrice? This is a coin, as you can see. This is the side that has the numbers on it. We call this side the head of the coin. So a coin can have a head, and if I was to flip this coin and I put up the other side, the side which does not have the numbers, we call that side the tail. So probability is the mathematics of chance and uncertainty. It allows us to be able to put a number on how likely something is to happen when we are not 100% sure of the outcome. And so to be able to do any calculations on probability, we must understand what we call the sample space. The sample space is simply every single thing that could possibly happen. For example, if I was to toss this coin or flip this coin into the air, I would have one of two things happen. The coin will end up landing like this with a head upwards, giving me a head, or the coin will land like this with a tail upwards, giving me a tail. So a coin has a sample space of a head and a tail. So we can say that the sample space of a coin, the sample space or all the possible outcomes are, we will use capital H for a head and capital T for a tail. And so the question says, what are the possible outcomes in the toss of a coin three times? We will use what we call a probability tree. This has been used to quickly illustrate or show how this can happen. So in a probability tree, if I was to throw a coin or toss a coin, in the first trial, we will get one of two outcomes. In the first trial, I will use a probability tree. This tree will have two arms to indicate that if I toss a coin, I will get one of two outcomes. I can either have a tail showing upwards or pointing upwards in the end, or I can have a head in the first toss of a coin. We have been told to toss the coin three times. Now, if I have a head in the first toss of the coin, then in the second toss of the coin, I can have two more possibilities. I can have another head show up, or I can have a tail. The two cannot show up at once. And in the third toss of the coin, I can either have a head in the first, a head in the second, and a head in the third toss of the coin, or I can have a head in the first, a head in the second, and a tail in the third toss of the coin. Now, what if in my first toss of the coin I had a head, and next I had a tail in the second toss? In the third toss of the coin, I can still have one of two outcomes or one of two possibilities. I can have a head in the first, a tail in the second, and a head in the third toss of the coin, or I can have a head in the first toss, a tail in the second, and a tail in the third toss of the coin. Now, what if the first toss of the coin began with a tail upwards? I tossed the coin for the first round and I had a tail. If I toss the coin again with the second or for a second time, I could have one of two outcomes. I could have a head and a tail. So if it happened that in the first toss we get a tail, we can get a head for the second toss. Or if we get a tail for the first toss, we can get a tail for the second toss. Now, what about the third toss? We can get one of two possibilities here and one of two possibilities here. So if I had a tail in the first toss and a head in the second toss, in the third toss of the coin, I could get a head, or in the third toss of the coin, I could get a tail. If I had a tail in the first toss of the coin and a tail in the second toss of the coin, in the third toss of the coin, I can still have a head or a tail. So let's now write down all the possible outcomes we can have if we toss a coin three times. We can have a head, and a head. So we'll put here, we can have H, comma, H, comma, and H. A head for the first toss, a head for the second toss, and a head for the third toss. We can have a head, and a tail. So here we will put a bracket, H or head for the first toss, another H or head for the second toss, a comma, and a T for tail during the third toss. The next possible outcome we can have is a head, a tail, and a head in that specific order. Notice that order matters in probability. So we can have a head in the first toss, comma, a tail in the second toss, comma, and a head in the third toss. Next, we can have a head, a tail, and a tail. So I'll put another bracket here and say we can have a head, comma, a tail, comma, and a tail. Now, we can also have a tail in the first toss, a head in the second toss, and a head in the third toss. So I'll put a bracket here and I'll put tail, comma, head for this one, comma, and head for the last toss. We can have a tail, a head, and a tail. So I'll put a bracket here and I'll put a tail for the first toss, comma, a head. We can have a head in the second toss, comma, and a tail in the third toss. Next, we can have a tail, and a head. So I'll put here we can have a tail, comma, for the first toss, a tail again, comma, during the second toss, and a head during the third toss of the coin. And lastly, we can have a tail, and a tail. So I'll put another bracket here, and I'll say we can have a tail during the first toss, comma, another tail during the second toss, comma, and a tail during the last toss. So here we have been able to write out all the possible outcomes. So we can have 8 possible outcomes if we toss a coin 3 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 possible outcomes if we toss a coin 3 times.